Hello, welcome back. Today's video is kind of an interesting video. It's I don't know if I want to use the word survival type video, but if you're in a pinch and you need to come up with a very inexpensive ingot mold, there's a few things you can do. I have a block of 4x4 wood here that was cut off of a piece that I found out laying in the yard. You could use a piece of oak, firewood, or any kind of wood that you see sitting around to make a very inexpensive ingot mold. Now, this is not a permanent solution by any means. This is a temporary way of getting your lead poured into ingots. A couple things you might need would be some sort of drill bit. This happens to be a 1-inch spade bit. Whatever size you have, depending on how big you want your ingots to be. This is also a 1-inch auger bit. That's what I'll be using today. You'll need a block of wood. You'll need some sort of drill to drill the hole in the end of the wood, and you'll need some sort of saw to cut it lengthwise once you get your hole drilled in the end. So if you don't have a drill bit, there is the option of putting a little fire. I don't know if you can see, let me back out. There's the option of putting a little fire here on the end and using, whether you can find like a rock, you know, or a spoon, any kind of metal, and let that fire burn. Don't let it get too close to the outside, but you can also burn a hole down into this. Now, it takes a lot of time, but like I said earlier, in a survival situation or a last-ditch effort to come up with a way of making an ingot, that would be a possibility. So I'm going to go ahead and get me a hole drilled down here in the end, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm just finishing up drilling this hole. So what I've done is I've taken my piece of wood and I've drilled a nice deep hole. It goes, oh, I'm guessing down about that far into the wood. So that's going to be where I'm going to pour the molten lead, is into that hole. Next step is to take my circular saw . Oops, bear with me. Take my circular saw. Make sure you got your safety glasses on for this and some sort of hearing protection. I happen to be using these Howard lights. They work pretty good. What you want to do is you want to rip lengthwise down this hole. Okay, so I have half of it. And now let me follow this line and I'll rip the rest of the other half. So basically what's happened is I've ripped this piece into two parts, and the hole that's inside is where we're going to pour our molten lead. And that's going to be, this is going to be the cavity for our ingot. From here, I'm going to go start up my lead, and we'll be back and I'll show you what we're going to do to pour into here. Okay, here we are. I've got the mold that I just made. It's in two pieces. Basically, I'm going to put them pieces together, and I'm going to take a clamp. My plan is to clamp it very tight. And I'm going to set this thing here. Over here, I'm working on a load of lead, and right now it has a lot of impurities in it, otherwise known as dross. So I want to take my spoon here, and I'm going to just gently scrape out these impurities. Again, you want to make sure that there's no liquid coming in contact with this molten lead, because what could happen is you could have a steam explosion. It's a very violent explosion, and it'll throw molten lead everywhere. So I'm just basically corralling all of this dross so that I can remove it, because we don't want that junk there in our lead. From here, I'm going to take my ladle, and because I don't know right now if my ladle was hot or cold or what, I'm going to introduce it to the lead very slowly so that it can start to heat up the ladle. I don't have a lot of lead right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pan and I'm going to fill my ladle with lead. And then I'm going to take the lead in this ladle, basically put it back into the pan to stay hot. Okay? If you have any dross in your ladle, go ahead and remove it, because we're getting ready to pour this into that mold that we just made. You might not have that much dross, but you might have a little bit. Now let me zoom out. We'll look at the mold now. I'm going to pour this hot lead into this hole on our mold. You see it's already starting to steam, it's already starting to smoke. This is fine. I'm going to go ahead and turn this stove off. Put my ladle away. And we're going to just let this simmer for a few minutes. We're going to let this harden, this mixture. We got to give this about 10 minutes to cool. I'll be back then. Okay, I'm back, and as you can see, I have a couple of things in front of me. I have a candle here, and I have a pile of sawdust. And you might be wondering what these two items have in common with each other. When it comes to melting and smelting your lead, cooking it basically, bringing it to a molten form, a liquid form, you would use candle wax to flux the metal to get rid of any dross, any impurities. If you don't have candle wax available, sawdust works great, because it is a sponge, if you will, And obviously you don't have to use that much. You would only use like a small, you know, half of a teaspoon or something. What you'll do is you'll put that in your lead when it's in a liquid form. It may or may not catch on fire. It will smoke a lot. And what's going to happen is it's going to draw, just like a sponge, it's going to draw all the impurities into it. And so in a pinch, when you don't have candles available, but you can get access to sawdust or wood chips or whatever you can find, this works very well for flux. And that it'll burn, it'll turn black, it'll float to the surface, and from there you can remove it and then have pure lead that way. This ingot that we poured a few minutes ago has been sitting here for about, I'd say about 7 or 8 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and split this by taking the clamp off, and I'm going to go ahead and open this mold and we'll see what it looks like. There it goes, it's starting to loosen. There it is. There's our ingot. I might need to find me a little screwdriver to pry it out. So bear with me. This ingot is hard. It's solidified. It's ready to come on out. You're probably, if you take a close-up of it, you'll see a lot of wood into the ingot itself. Don't worry so much about that right now, because that's like flux being naturally embedded into the metal. So when you go to melt that down, it's already fluxed, so to speak. This mold can be used again and again and again until it starts leaking. And what they'll generally do is they'll start leaking somewhere, out the side, out the bottom, wherever. But they can be used many, many times. Don't expect a perfect sized ingot. It's kind of neat here because you can see where the auger bit threads were. Kind of made a neat little impression. But anyway, that's how to produce a lead ingot on the cheap. Very inexpensive way. You can make plenty of those, and they work pretty good. If you look at that ingot and you compare it to one of the other ingots that I made, you know, they're similar in size. This one was made with an 1.25" angle iron. So you can tell that they're pretty much, you know, they're pretty close to each other in size. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was kind of experimental for me, to be honest with you. I wanted to try it. I read about it. Thought, well, I'll give that a try. And I kind of like it. I guess what I'm most impressed with is the fact that there's wood inlaid into the metal already, and that's kind of neat because it's kind of got its own flux already with it. I'll pour another one here in a few minutes in that mold again, and then we'll be able to see what it looks like after it's been poured into a mold that's already been used. So we'll do that, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, we're back. I just put a spoonful of sawdust in here since we're talking about primitive ingot molds, and we're also going to talk a little bit about primitive fluxing. Sawdust is a very spongy-like surface. What I mean by that is very absorbent. When I mix this sawdust into the lead, it's going to smoke like crazy, as you can see here. But the smoke will stop, and when the smoke stops, that's when the fluxing process is through. That's when the the sawdust has absorbed everything it can absorb, and there's nothing left in it to burn. It's going to turn into a black, burnt matter. It's going to float to the top of the lead. So I just want to mix real good, because if I don't mix, it never gets a chance to meet all the impurities. So I got to keep it mixing. Make sure that you're not splashing. Make sure you got your safety glasses on. You're in a well ventilated area. Again, we're dealing with molten lead. Okay, and I'm just going to keep it mixing. Back and forth, all around, scraping the bottom, scraping the sides, the top, everything. Once the once the smoking gets a little less, you can start to collect all your dross. You do not have to wait till the smoke stops. You can, but you don't have to. If you don't have all day to wait for it, don't wait for it. It will still do its job. Again, because we're dealing with molten lead, we don't want to get any water or liquid into this. Otherwise, there would be the possibility for a steam explosion, which is very, very violent. It'll scare you. It's a very loud pop. If I could find a way to demonstrate that safely, I'll do it. So now I've skimmed all the dross off. I'm going to back the camera out a little bit. We're going to come over here to our mold. What I'm going to do is the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to get my ladle, warm my ladle up nice and slow, and I'm going to pour some of this lead in the ladle again. And then I'm going to put it back in the pan to heat up, and then again, just like I did before, I'll pour this ladle into our new mold. Now, we've used the mold before, so you want to be aware and be, aware of the possibility that the side of the mold where the two pieces come together may leak. Okay, if this happens, don't freak out. It's kind of normal actually. If it leaks a little bit, generally it'll fix itself, and you just keep pouring. You might get a little lead coming out the bottom, out the side, something like that. Don't stop, just keep pouring. Remember, we're talking about a primitive mold here. And I did have a small leak out the side. So we're going to get some more lead. Continue to pour. If you do spring a leak out the side of your mold, you can use a stick, you can use a spoon, you can use anything to touch it. And when you touch it, what will happen is it'll stop the mold, it'll stop the leak. I actually had a pretty good little leak over here before I got it stopped. So now we're going to wait for this thing about 5-10 minutes, and then we'll pull it out and see what it looks like. Okay, here we are. We're back. This thing has sat for about 5 or 6 minutes. We'll go ahead and release the clamp. And I told you earlier about how it sprung a leak right here. And what I ended up doing was I ended up putting my spoon against it to stop it. So I got a little bit of leakage right there, but that's normal. Sometimes they'll leak out of the bottom a little bit. They'll leak out of the side. If they leak again, make sure you put something against it. You know, don't put your finger obviously, but put a stick or rock or something, and a lot of times it'll stop that leak really quickly, because this lead cools fast and therefore it'll seal quickly. So again, we're going to take our hammer, break our mold open. There's our ingot inside. This one I didn't let cool as long as I did the others, so it's going to be hot. There's our mold, and that's what those ingots look like that come out of that primitive mold. Just a piece of wood, 3 ingots. I think it does a good job if we were, if it was a survival situation or something like that. It does a good job. It's kind of interesting how the bottom has like a little flat area, and that's where the lead had leaked between the 2 layers of the mold. But like I said, in a primitive environment, there's a good alternative to making ingots. Hope you enjoy this video, and thanks again for watching. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. Feel free to leave a comment. Thanks, guys.